Guess what, Rosalie? My family's coming over and you're in charge of hosting them at this fancy restaurant. Can you handle that? Oh, and by the way, do you know how to manage money? You didn't save anything, did you? Rosalie was puzzled. What do you mean? What's mine is yours. So, this restaurant you own. It's mine too. Everything's free. That sounded crazy to Rosalie. Her husband Kyle seemed clueless, thinking he could just invite the family over and not pay. Something wasn't right. Plus, he didn't seem to get it. He was about to land himself in trouble. Kyle, we can't give everything away for free. But don't worry about the money. I know you don't have savings, and I knew you were inviting the family today. So, I already arranged for someone else to pay in advance. Stop lying. I never mentioned inviting the family, and none of them said anything about being billed. My husband insisted, gesturing toward our relatives. His parents, his brother, his wife, and a few others were chatting with a waitress nearby. He smirked and made fun of them while I struggled not to burst out laughing, my lips twitching. I've been getting ready for this day. I'll do my best to entertain them just like you want, I replied, smiling to myself as I listened to him. Our in-laws approached. Hi, Rosalie. We're here to visit today. What a lovely place this is. Everyone seems to be having a great time, they said warmly, their demeanor a sharp contrast to my husband's. Mom, Dad, thanks for coming. Rosalie's happy you're here. Today's on me, my husband said casually, even though he planned to eat for free. He lied effortlessly, not just to his parents but probably to his brother and other relatives too. He's lied before, but he's so confident he won't get caught because everyone sees him as the perfect son. Rosalie's really been excelling. She took over the restaurant from her late parents and has been running it impressively. It wasn't easy at first, but she turned things around. She's my pride and joy, he boasted to his parents, deliberately praising me, his pride and joy, to deceive them. But in reality, he barely sees me as more than a maid. As he spoke, my in-laws turned to me, nodding in approval. They've always recognized my efforts since the beginning of our marriage. Their kindness shone through their eyes. Meanwhile, my husband subtly changed his expression, silently warning me to keep quiet. Rosalie's been working hard, and Kyle's doing well too. Everything's going smoothly at Brown Trading, right? Your salary's been increasing, hasn't it? They asked. Yeah, that's correct. I'm respected at Brown Trading, and my boss has high hopes for me. I aim to lead my team through actions and results, and I'll keep up the good work, my husband replied confidently. That's our son, all right. Spending $155,000 like that isn't something just anyone can do, his parents remarked proudly, but my husband's expression darkened slightly at that moment. Today, we have 15 relatives dining with us, including my in-laws and brother-in-law's family. It's $11,000 per person, totaling $115,000. I calculated silently, knowing my husband was trying to get it all for free, unaware of the cost. When he realized it was pricier than he thought, he quickly regained composure to avoid exposing his lie. This one's on me, everyone. It's the least I can do. I just got my bonus, so no worries at all. Leave it to me, he declared, puffing up his chest as the in-laws chuckled softly. Checking the time, it was 6:00 p.m., so I guided my husband and in-laws to their reserved seats. The other relatives followed suit. Just as they were settling in, my husband shot me a creepy grin. An hour later, I approached their table in the banquet room. They were enjoying themselves, oblivious to the surroundings. Feel free to order more, everyone. It boosts restaurant sales, and Rosalie will be delighted, so go ahead, my husband encouraged, each word accompanied by a flurry of extra orders. With the banquet meals and additional orders, the bill had surpassed $20,000. Everyone assumed my husband, a corporate elite with a hefty income, was treating them. While some hesitated, my husband seemed to push them to order more. That's when I decided to set the record straight, loud enough for all to hear. Since it's Kyle's treat, I had $60,000 transferred yesterday, so everyone, please enjoy yourselves without holding back, I announced, causing a buzz of surprise among the relatives. $60,000. Classic Kyle, were words of almost admiration that flew around. While the relatives reacted like this, my husband wore a bewildered look, clueless about what was going on. I didn't miss his expression and added a line to start my counterattack. Well, the $60,000 isn't for the food. It's for alimony, actually, I stated, causing puzzled looks among the buzzing relatives. Alimony, Kyle? What's this about alimony? One of them asked. No, I don't know about any alimony. Sometimes Rosalie jokes around, so please don't mind her. Come on, Rosalie, don't upset everyone with jokes like that. My husband tried to brush it off, but he was clearly the most troubled. His face was smiling, but his eyes told a different story. The way he looked at me was terrifying. But it wasn't done. Kyle, you're the one making uncomfortable jokes here. I think it's time the family knew that, right? I said firmly, handing him a piece of paper and a bank book. As he examined them closely, his face turned pale. The alimony is for cheating. Kyle has been unfaithful. He's not the person you all think he is. He can lie and deceive people without a second thought, I revealed. The atmosphere in the banquet room shifted abruptly. The once lively chatter ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. The document I handed to my husband was the original alimony claim, and the bank book showed a record of a $60,000 transfer. Everyone's attention was fixed on my husband and me, and silence lingered for a few seconds. But it was my husband who broke it. How funny, Rosalie. That's quite something. It looks just like a real statement in a bank book. But really, this is going too far. There's no way I would cheat. It seemed like he had shifted back to his usual confident demeanor, but that confidence quickly faded, and I couldn't help but smile. What are you talking about, Kyle? You're the one who's gone too far. Not only cheating, but also trying to bully me into eating for free, lying to all the relatives that it's your treat. That's too much of a joke. Correct yourself quickly, everyone. Don't take Rosalie's words to heart. Without needing to say anything, the relatives seemed unable to believe it outright, and no one spoke up. I didn't react to my husband's words either, just watching his actions closely. Gradually, he started to panic. That's when he tried to get his parents on his side. Dad, Mom, tell her to stop these senseless jokes at a time like this. Yes, everyone calm down and listen to me, his dad began. Rosalie isn't making any senseless jokes. She's just stating the facts. It's undeniable that Kyle has been unfaithful, and she's not threatening Rosie. He's trying to get today's meal for free too. What are you two even saying? Are you taking what Rosie said seriously? That's not funny at all, my husband protested, but his parents seemed convinced. The only thing that's not funny is this situation. We've come here knowing everything to confront you, I declared. Yes, I had already confessed everything to my in-laws, revealing how my husband uses his outward kindness to play the dutiful son while behind the scenes, he's up to no good. Even as we waited for our reservation time, he tried to deceive his parents, but they saw through his lies. Enough. I would never deceive everyone. You're ruining the good mood we had, Rosalie. What are you going to do about this? My disclosure and having the in-laws on my side were completely unexpected for him. He visibly started to lose his composure, standing up and glaring at me intensely, as if he might lunge at me any moment. Come on, brother, calm down. Let's sit down and talk this over calmly. Nicholas, you believe me, right? Interjected his brother, my brother-in-law Nicholas, cutting through my husband's angry shouts. Nicholas, busy with his own job, was attending today with his wife Yasmin. I knew Nicholas and my husband had been close since before I started dating him, and he is as gentle and consistently smiling as the in-laws. However, Nicholas's next action would utterly defeat my husband. He pulled a thick envelope out of his bag and handed it to my husband, saying, "You believe me, right, brother?" "How can I believe you when you've been cheating with my wife, Nicholas?" "You what?" My husband's accusation hung heavy in the air as Nicholas handed over the envelope. Inside was a report on the infidelity investigation. It turns out my husband had been cheating with Nicholas's wife, Yasmin. Just before my father-in-law had said, "We've come here knowing everything," and by we, he meant the brother-in-law's family too. And it turns out, I learned about my husband's infidelity thanks to Nicholas. Hesitantly, my husband checked the contents of the envelope, turning pale as a ghost. Inside were numerous photos of him cheating with Yasmin. Pictures of them dining at a fancy restaurant, looking into each other's eyes. There were photos of them being cozy in a car and others of them embracing and kissing in front of a hotel. There's no way he could just say they were just going out. It was indeed a decisive moment, a hellish scene. "Is this a joke? Unbelievable, Kyle did this," were the whispers I heard. The relatives around us were in turmoil, and the banquet hall buzzed in a whole different way. For my husband, it couldn't have gotten any worse. He was completely flustered now. No, wait. This investigation report is fake. The photos must be doctored because I haven't cheated with Yasmin. We didn't cheat, right? He pleaded, trying to enlist Yasmin's support in his last-ditch effort. Immediately after Yasmin, now the center of attention, bowed deeply to the floor in full prostration. "Everyone, I am terribly sorry. I have had an affair with Kyle." Yasmin's confession stunned the room. My husband in particular was visibly shaken. He hadn't anticipated Yasmin fully admitting to the affair. He had been insisting the alimony bill and the bank book were fake, only thinking of himself and taking me for granted. He couldn't have imagined this. Yasmin's earnest apology captivated not only my husband but also the rest of the banquet hall. But it wasn't just my husband who was affected. All the relatives were stunned by Yasmin's admission. As her forehead remained on the floor, she slowly began to speak. It really was just a fling. Nicholas is a wonderful husband, but, well, it lacked excitement, you might say. Just doing housework and waiting at home for Nicholas to return, I started to feel like my life would forever be the same. And suddenly, I got bored. When I approached Kyle, he was happy to go along. Everyone listened in silence to Yasmin's voice, mixed with regret and reflection. As she raised her head and revealed more truths, I tried to end it immediately, knowing it was wrong. But Kyle got serious about it. He threatened to expose everything if I tried to break it off. I know it sounds like an excuse now, but I am truly sorry. Yasmin's confession left the relatives staring in disbelief at such a lack of morals. Yasmin had initiated the affair, and though she was threatened, it's hard to completely sympathize with her. But she came here today to admit her mistakes and apologize, which is somewhat redeemable. However, my husband tried to escape by lying and making excuses, unaware that he was just tightening the noose around his own neck. He really is a fool, brother. It's all useless. I, Rosalie, and our parents know everything. I'm going to demand alimony from you, and you're going to pay Nicholas. When did you realize? You didn't even do an investigation. You must have been sure, right? Yes, I heard it from someone I truly despise, you brother. Right, Rosalie? That's right. It wasn't just Yasmin. He had his hands on other women too. What, Rosalie? How much do you know? Just give me a break already. Too bad, Kyle. I know everything, and if anyone should be asking for mercy, it's us. I never thought you'd even make a move on an employee at a restaurant. I continued, then called a woman into the banquet hall. This woman was the waitress who had been talking with the in-laws, Nicholas, Yasmin, and several other relatives while they waited for their reservation time. Turns out, while having an affair with Yasmin, my husband had also been making advances towards this waitress. She had also attended the same school with me back in our student days. Before even consulting Rosalie, who was the restaurant owner, she came to me. Kyle had threatened to destroy your family if you spilled the beans to Rosalie. You're really horrible. I've said it before, but we know everything, brother. All you can do now is admit your guilt and apologize, just like Yasmin did. Kyle, let me ask you something. Why would you deceive Rosalie to carry on with your affairs? From what we can see, Rosalie has been nothing but supportive. She's been managing the restaurant that she inherited from her parents and taking care of home as well. What did she ever do to you? Under the cold stares, my husband flinched at his father-in-law's question. I thought there was no valid excuse for infidelity, but if I had been unconsciously pushing him into a corner, I wanted to reflect on myself too. Awaiting his response, what he said next was shocking. I married Rosalie because I felt sorry for her. Before our marriage, she was struggling to turn the restaurant around with both parents gone. I was the only one she could rely on. I couldn't live without that feeling of superiority. And then what? Rosalie managed to turn it around. The restaurant became popular, and suddenly I found it boring. That's why I thought of dumping her, my husband said, smirking as if he had nothing to lose. Despite already knowing his true nature, a deep disgust welled up from within. It seemed he viewed everyone but himself as mere tools. The cold stares from the relatives quickly turned to pity. A feeling of superiority felt good, got bored, and decided to dump her. Kyle, do you realize what you're saying? You're successful in your big company because Rosalie supported you. Don't you have any gratitude? No, you're wrong. I succeeded because of my own skills. Besides, isn't it normal for a wife to support her husband? Does a mother serve a father expecting gratitude? No, right? Rosalie served me because she loved me. It's presumptuous to expect gratitude for that, my husband argued. Enough, Kyle. I find you repulsive. We are cutting ties with you, but we will watch you until you take responsibility. Be prepared. Fine, cut ties or whatever. I have a stable job. I can live on my own. In fact, it's a relief, right, Rosalie? You can enjoy life more without me around. I'll pay whatever alimony or anything else, so don't worry." My husband laughed, seemingly without a care. Looking at him, I thought again, he doesn't understand anything, knows nothing at all. "Really? You can pay alimony? Aren't you about to be sued by your company, Kyle? A lawsuit for damages isn't cheap, you know," I retorted. "What? The company's suing me? That's ridiculous. You were bragging today, weren't you, that you're respected at Brown Trading, that your boss has high expectations, that you lead your subordinates with actions and results. But it was all lies. In reality, you've been threatening your subordinates and embezzling company money." "What? I would never do something like that. I rose through the ranks on my own merit." "Don't talk nonsense when you know nothing," my husband protested. "What you don't know, Kyle, is that all the subordinates you threatened have come forward. The company has been aware of the issue for a while. But you don't have to believe me, I'm just stating facts. It'll be interesting to see how far you fall," I explained to him in a calm tone, trying to make him understand. And the color drained from his face. If he really had no idea, he could have laughed it off. But the truth is, he was misbehaving at work too, so denying it was impossible. Seeing the realization dawn on him, he quickly turned, pleading, "Rosalie, you're right. I knew nothing. I'd only said those things because I wanted to leave. Please continue to support me if we divorce now." I stopped him right there. "Don't say anything more. The relatives are about to tear you apart, Kyle. It's too late for anything now, and it doesn't matter whether you knew or didn't know. No one will help you, and you'll get your wish to live alone. Oh, and by the way, make sure you pay for today's bill. It was your treat, wasn't it?" The moment I said this, Kyle collapsed to his knees. No one reached out to help him. Today, after threatening me, deceiving the relatives to get a free meal, he finds himself unable to get off scot-free. Afterwards, I filed for divorce, and Kyle was sued by his company. Kyle ended up incurring a significant amount of debt. The reason Kyle had no savings despite dealing with Brown Trading was that he was footing the bill for entertainment expenses with the employees. However, this entertainment was merely a pretext. In reality, Kyle was just squandering money at nightclubs. Given that Kyle, who had a high-paying job, had no savings, it's clear he had been recklessly spending his money. This was entirely Kyle's own doing, so he should have dealt with it himself. But instead, he asked for help from his in-laws and Nicholas's family. Of course, no one was willing to help. Kyle had defiantly claimed he could live on his own and even laughed off being disowned. So it's no surprise, yet Kyle continued his futile attempts and kept sending messages to my smartphone incessantly. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have cheated. I regret it. Please help me." The messages clearly showed he was desperate, but it felt like just another act, given his history of deceit and manipulation. It's hard to believe him still. I have not blocked Kyle's contact. I've left it unblocked so that I can receive his messages. I want to see what becomes of a person who has only thought of himself and demeaned others around him. It's uncertain what will happen to Kyle now that he has hit rock bottom. One thing I do know is that unless Kyle truly repents and changes himself, he will not be able to climb out of this pit. That much I am sure of. "Rosalie, I am truly sorry for what my brother has done. It's irreparable." Nicholas apologized to me after divorcing Yasmin. The in-laws who came with him also deeply bowed their heads. "I am a failure as a parent. I can't believe I didn't see my son's true nature sooner. If only I had realized earlier, this wouldn't have happened. Kyle took advantage of your kindness, Rosalie, and did whatever he wanted. It was our responsibility to stop him. You all don't need to apologize. If anything, I am grateful. I had no one else to rely on, no parents or relatives. So thank you for always being on my side. From the beginning of our marriage, the in-laws and Nicholas have been my allies. That I was able to turn around the inherited restaurant was possible only with their support. They are genuinely kind and always smiling. They showed such fury on my behalf that was incredibly comforting to me, who is utterly alone. I will never forget this warmth for as long as I live. My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old, a stay-at-home mom. My husband Benjamin, 34, works a regular office job. We have a beautiful little girl named Mia, and after 8 years of marriage, our 6-year-old daughter has both of us wrapped around her finger. I also have an older sister, Lily, who just turned 35. She recently got divorced due to personality clashes and is now a single mom to her son Logan, who is 4 years old. One day, we had planned a trip to the zoo with just the four of us. Unfortunately, I caught a cold and had to stay in bed. Benjamin decided to take the day off from work and still take Mia and Logan to the zoo. It ended up being just him and Lily alone, despite them being in-laws. Little did I know, that day would mark a change. Fast forward to another day. I was walking down the shopping street on my way home from the grocery store when I glimpsed Benjamin and Lily in a cafe by chance. I was puzzled but had to pick up Mia from after-school care soon, so I headed home without dwelling on it. That night, when Benjamin got home, he casually mentioned they ran into each other and sought shelter from the rain in the cafe. I believed him. However, from then on, he started coming home late more often, asking for more pocket money, and going out on his days off. When Lily visited, their relationship seemed more intimate than before, leaving me with a string of suspicions. Despite this, I trusted him. Benjamin still adored Mia, and we seemed to have a good relationship. Little did I know, I was the only one who thought everything was fine. Then, an incident occurred that shattered my illusion. One day, as usual, Lily came over to our house. A friend invited me on a trip. "Would you mind taking care of Logan for about a week? It's in the Bahamas?" she asked persistently. Initially hesitant, I understood Lily had it tough since her divorce. Despite my reservations, I reluctantly agreed. As Lily's departure approached, Benjamin announced he would be out of town for a few days on a business trip. Surprisingly, it was the same day as Lily's trip to the Bahamas. Was this merely a coincidence? Was it my imagination that Benjamin seemed secretive and overly attached to his phone? Was it my sister's tough times clouding my judgment? The morning of Lily's trip, she arrived with Logan. I noticed immediately that something was wrong. Logan's hand was hot, his body feverish. Lily confirmed he'd had a fever since yesterday. "We can't delay. We need to get him to a hospital quickly," I insisted. But then Lily dropped a bombshell. "I'll leave Logan to you." Shocked, I protested, "You can't possibly leave a sick child behind." "I have no choice. We've planned this trip for a while. Please take good care of him," she said, brushing off my concerns. Despite my pleas, she left, leaving me to care for Logan, whose health took precedence over everything else. I couldn't believe it. Logan was suffering with a high fever, and yet his condition worsened from the stress of moving around. I quickly tucked him into bed and placed a cold, damp towel on his forehead. While preparing an ice pillow in the freezer, my husband woke up. "Honey, it seems like Logan has a fever," he remarked. "Really? My sister's awful. She left Logan like this to go on a trip," I replied, frustration evident in my voice. "It can't be helped. They've had this trip planned for a long time, and it's too late to cancel now." "You too, dear. Poor Logan. If you're so concerned, then you should take care of him. Honey, can you do something about your business trip? If Logan has a contagious disease, he might pass it on to Mia." "I'll take care of Logan, and I need you to take care of Mia," I suggested, hoping my husband would prioritize our daughter over his work. But my hope was dashed. "What? That's impossible. If you're worried, why not leave her with your parents?" "That won't work. Our parents are busy with their jobs, and your parents live too far away to drop her off at this hour." "Then it can't be helped. Logan will be fine if we let him rest." "Don't worry," he said dismissively. "Please don't be so casual about this. What do you want me to do? I can't change my plans." "Oh, it's time. I have to go now. Bye." With that, he hurriedly left. Left alone, I immediately called my parents. They couldn't take time off from their sudden work commitments, but they agreed to leave work early and pick up Mia as soon as possible. I felt relieved when my mom assured me they were on their way. Until my mom arrives, I'll have to keep Mia locked in her room. I feel sorry for her, but it can't be helped, I thought to myself. Meanwhile, Logan's condition seemed to be worsening. He started coughing in addition to the fever. In the afternoon, my mom, who had left work early, arrived. I handed Mia over to her and headed straight to the pediatric clinic with Logan. In the car, the motion seemed to make Logan uncomfortable, which was hard to see. The doctor said it was just a common cold and prescribed a fever reducer. He asked us to observe Logan and call an ambulance if his fever went up or if he seemed delirious. "I'm sorry, Mom, for leaving Mia with you," I apologized. "Don't worry about it. More importantly, I'm concerned about Logan," my mom reassured me. After hanging up with my mom, I decided to call my husband's office. I needed to find out where he was staying on his business trip, just in case. The reply I received was, I should be on paid vacation. I sighed, lifting my voice towards the heavens as if making a plea. A dreaded suspicion was beginning to solidify. Opening my husband's laptop, I had never looked through it before, but a quick scan of his browsing history revealed his destination, the Bahamas. Both flight tickets and hotel bookings were arranged by him. I recognized the hotel's name. It was the same place my sister had mentioned. My sister and husband in the Bahamas at the same time, staying in the same hotel. Such a coincidence seemed next to impossible. The mere fact that my husband was in the Bahamas, taking paid leave while claiming to be on a business trip, was alarming. Curious, I looked at my smartphone, checking my sister's social media posts. There were no new posts, but looking at her recent ones, although not clearly visible, I could tell she was frequently with someone. The glimpses of clothing I could catch were all too familiar. What changed my suspicion into certainty was a photo where the wristwatch of the man she was with was visible, a watch I had given my husband. Though not expensive, it was from a unique manufacturer, making the odds that another man dressed like my husband, wearing the same watch, would appear in my sister's photo infinitesimally small. And then I found the conclusive piece of evidence, a photo titled "Window Shopping" with my sister's reflection on the glass. On the edge of that photo, another person's reflection was undeniably my husband. My blissfully ignorant sister must have posted the picture without noticing her husband's reflection in the glass. My hands trembling, I saved all the pictures. There was no mistake about it. My sister and husband were having an affair. Right now, they were together. I felt everything I had built up with my husband crumbling down all at once. I tried calling them numerous times, but soon a voicemail message started playing. It seemed they had turned off their phones. Logan's fever still hadn't broken. Seeing his distressed face, anger started to rise within me. Despite our young child's suffering, despite being in such a difficult situation right now, my sister and husband were probably laughing, enjoying their vacation in the Bahamas. Could there be a worse story? I was trembling with anger, wondering what to do, but that could wait. First, I needed Logan to recover. However, Logan's fever showed no signs of abating. In fact, it seemed to be increasing. I was shocked when I took his temperature. 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Children tend to run high fevers. He had experienced 40 degrees before, but never this high. Why isn't the fever reducer working? Logan was completely drained. It looked painful for him to even move. What should I do? I fought hard to suppress the panic that was threatening to overtake me. I need to call an ambulance, I decided, clutching my smartphone tightly. Mama, Logan murmured in a small voice, his face contorted in pain. He called for his aunt. Unforgivable. I will never forgive them, I thought as my vision seemed to turn red with anger. Logan's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. A week had passed since then. Contrary to my feelings of sorrow, today was a clear day. Staring blankly at the vast blue sky, tears began to spill over. I had lost count of how many times I had cried, yet the tears wouldn't stop. I could feel Maya's hands trembling in mine. My daughter was crying too. As I lifted her up, I saw my parents weeping uncontrollably over her small, trembling shoulders, along with everyone else in attendance. Suddenly, my smartphone vibrated. I put Maya down and saw my sister's name on the screen. Hello. Hi, Emily. Long time no see. I just got back from the Bahamas. I've just landed at the airport. I'm off to pick up Logan. Thanks for looking after him, my sister said cheerfully. It felt like a phone call from another world. He's gone to heaven, I muttered to myself. What? My sister on the other end of the phone didn't seem to understand what I had said. Huh? Heaven? What are you talking about? I don't understand. That's what I'm saying. He went to heaven while you were on your trip to the Bahamas. Huh? I don't understand what you're saying. You'll understand when you get here, I replied, my voice heavy with grief. The funeral is over and we're at the crematorium. Huh? Crematorium? My sister sounded confused. When I tried to explain the location of the crematorium, she abruptly hung up the phone. Logan. My sister just got out of the taxi and dramatically changed her expression as she started running. She called his name and looked around, but Logan was nowhere to be found. Where is he? He's not here. Of course he's not. What do you mean? I slowly pointed in one direction towards the crematorium. The crematorium doesn't emit smoke like it used to, but it's true. He's being cremated right now, I whispered. Logan? That day, the day you dropped off Logan. His fever shot up to 42 degrees Fahrenheit all at once. 42 degrees Fahrenheit. The antipyretic we got from the pediatrician had no effect. His condition worsened rapidly. We had to call an ambulance in a panic. So that means Logan is... I don't want to answer that. We're in the middle of a funeral, I said, spreading my arms wide, pointing at the crematorium. Hey, what does this mean? What happened to Logan? Why are you here? Someone shouted in place of my speechless sister. It was my husband. Unbelievably, he had come here with my sister. What does that matter right now? What about Logan? Of course it matters. Not losing to my husband's voice, I shouted back, how can you two just abandon your family and go on a secret love trip? Moreover, Logan had a fever, and even when I said I needed help, you ignored me and went on your trip. Are you out of your mind? Who? What are you talking about? I already know. When I asked your company, they said you had taken paid leave. I checked your computer and found a booking for a trip to the Bahamas. You were on the same flight, if not the same hotel, as my sister. You think you can just claim this coincidence? That's... I must have had a terrifying look on my face. My husband lost his words under my intimidating stare. Tell me, Emily, did he die? Do you have the luxury to ask such a question now? What do you think we're doing here? Why do you think I'm in a simple, modest dress, standing at a crematorium? Don't you get it? No, 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 no. My sister's scream dominated the scene as she broke down crying. I looked down at her with cold eyes. You have no right to cry. You abandoned your son to go on a secret trip with my husband. You're the worst kind of person. I was lonely. I was so lonely all by myself, so I just what? Reached out to your sister's husband? What do you mean? I've done nothing wrong. It's not my fault. The real villain here is my ex-husband who refused to take our son. And it's not just him, it's also the fault of our parents who never helped me with the child. And Emily too, my sister, never taking responsibility. I didn't choose to have a child. I didn't choose to be a single mother. I wanted him to take our son if we were going to get divorced, but he refused. I've been struggling alone because of that. But I didn't. I couldn't. Logan? Lily's voice broke as she said his name. It was her lover. My husband comforted her as she collapsed into tears. It seemed they were no longer interested in hiding their affair. Don't blame everyone else for your problems. Our parents and I have helped as much as we could. You can't justify leaving a sick child to go on a tryst. Not realizing how rotten you are, you're the worst. Hey Emily, isn't that a bit harsh? Lily just lost Logan. She's in shock. Shut up, accomplice. I'm divorcing you, so be ready to pay what you owe. What? What does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it. My husband and I argued while my sister cried. It was a chaotic situation. Our parents approached my tear-streaked sister, started blaming them. To add, Mom, why didn't you take care of Logan properly? Why did you let Logan? Suddenly, there was a loud slap. Enough with your nonsense. It was my father who slapped my sister's face. Don't blame others when you were the one who abandoned your child. And having an affair with your sister's husband, you shameless woman. I'm ashamed to have raised you like this. My sister cried even louder at her father's words. I wanted to punch my husband too. I was glaring at him when... Mommy. I heard a little boy's voice. My sister quickly turned around. There. What? Logan? My sister ran towards them, but the man quickly moved Logan out of her reach. Hey, what are you doing, Andrew? The man holding Logan was Andrew, my sister's ex-husband. He was the one who divorced my sister, citing irreconcilable differences. What are you doing leaving Logan like that? He's my son too. I complied with the court's decision that it's better for a mother to have custody, even though you insisted on not giving me parental rights. But you wouldn't let me see him, no matter how many times I asked. My worry proved justified. You're not fit to be Logan's mother. Just shut up. You should just pay the child support. I'd pay any amount for Logan, but you left him without care. You don't even know how critical his condition was, and you're out on your affair trip. That day, when Logan's condition deteriorated, I panicked and called an ambulance. When we got to the hospital and while he was being treated, I called her parents and Andrew, Logan's father. He was surprised when I told them my sister was on a trip with my husband. After that, Logan, who was discharged from the hospital in good health, was resting at Andrew's and his parents' house. Wait a minute, you're saying Logan's okay? Then whose? My husband asked, puzzled, staring at the crematorium. It's her grandmother. Our grandmother. Mother to me and my sister, and great-grandmother to Maya and Logan, I replied. She was in her advanced years and bedridden, living in a nursing facility. She passed away recently from old age. Despite being bedridden, our grandma was quite lucid and doted on her great-grandchildren, Maya and Logan. Whenever we visited her at the nursing home, she would light up with joy. Her sudden departure left us, my parents and Maya, in deep sorrow, unable to do anything but grieve. Logan, who had been ill, couldn't attend the funeral. However, since he'd called my sister to the crematorium, Andrew was there. His fever had subsided, and he looked well. You tricked us. No one said Logan had died. My sister accused us with her eyes, but it was we who had the right to accuse. I didn't hear about Grandma's death either, she snapped back. I tried calling both of you several times to tell you about Grandma's passing, but the line was always busy. Considering how kind she was to you, it's unfathomable that you're this late. Enough. You're all making fools of us. Logan, let's go home. You don't want to stay with such a man. You want to be with Mom, right? Andrew, give Logan back right now. Will you ever stop? The one who scolded my sister, who was bearing down on Andrew, was her father. Do you still think you can keep Logan with you after all of this? What you've done could have gotten you in legal trouble for child abandonment. You've proven to be an unfit mother. Never think you'll be allowed near Logan again. Logan will be raised by Andrew. Dad, how could you? We've decided to fully support Andrew and hire a lawyer. You are no longer our daughter. We're cutting ties with you. Mom. My sister's face went pale at her parents' harsh words. I stood in front of her with a firm stance. I'm divorcing my husband, so why don't the two of you stick together? You seem fine leaving your children behind to go on an overseas trip. Upon hearing this, my husband burst out, Emily, wait, it was just a lapse in judgment. Lily and I were just fooling around. The ones who matter to me are you and Mia. Then my sister also started shouting, what do you mean fooling around? You told me you no longer loved Emily and that I was the only one you loved. Stop the noise. I just love my daughter. Don't mess with me. As the storm reignited between my husband and my sister, we left the scene with my grandmother's ashes. After that, despite many disagreements, with the help of a lawyer, I managed to settle everything. Logan went to live with his dad. I thought he might feel sad being away from his mother, but he was rather pleased. It turned out my sister wasn't functioning as a mother at all. My husband and I had our disputes. Well, more accurately, my husband was absent. After being scolded by both my parents and his, he was feeling down. Then our daughter landed the knockout punch. I don't need daddy. She might be only 6 years old, but girls mature quickly. She must have understood her father's despicable actions in her own way. When our daughter looked at my husband like he was a bug, I couldn't help but laugh. For my husband, who adored his daughter, no, my ex-husband, there could be no greater punishment. He was allowed to see his daughter, but whether she wanted to see him was up to her. And so, the storm came to an end. Maya and I returned to my parents' home and are living peacefully. My parents are thrilled to live with Mia. She's starting elementary school next year, so we're excited about the preparations. I plan to find a job when she starts school. Logan comes by every now and then with Andrew. He looks totally different. His face is brighter and he's always smiling. Meanwhile, my sister and my ex-husband seem to have ended their relationship quite easily. I guess it was really just a fling for my ex-husband. Perhaps upset about being disliked by his daughter, he dumped my sister without hesitation. However, his despicable affair with his wife's sister became known at his company, which questioned his character. He was relocated to a remote area that will make it even more difficult for him to see his daughter. As for my sister, after being abandoned by everyone, she seemed to live like an empty shell for a while. Then she disappeared. We filed a missing persons report, but I have a feeling we'll never find my sister. That's just the feeling I get. 7 years ago, I got married to my husband. His sister already had kids back then. But right from the start, I felt like I wasn't really part of their family. My sister-in-law made it clear that I wasn't their aunt. She even told her kids that I wasn't their aunt. Because of this, I don't feel close to them like I do with my husband's other siblings' kids, who I treat like my own nieces and nephews. I love spending time with them and being a fun aunt. I've done things like painting their rooms and taking them on trips because I like being creative and making them happy. Even though I'm a mom now, I still love doing these things for my nieces and nephews because they're like my family, and I never really had one before. But when it comes to my sister-in-law's kids, I don't do any of that anymore. I've stopped trying to talk to them because my sister-in-law made it clear that she doesn't want me involved. I don't want to cause any drama or trouble by interacting with them since it seems like she doesn't want us to connect. Now, our kids feel jealous and left out because their cousins have cool stuff in their rooms and get to do fun things, while they don't. When my sister-in-law confronted me about it, she blamed me for making her kids feel that way. I told her it was her fault for creating a situation where I couldn't relate to her kids, and now they're the ones suffering because of it. I reminded her that she's reaping what she sowed, and her kids are the ones paying the price for it. Now she's all fired up, saying this and that. It's clear she's not happy, and honestly, I never wanted my kids to see her as their aunt anyway. The rest of the family just shakes their heads at her antics, but I know this tension isn't helping anyone. I do feel bad for her kids though. I can't help but wonder if I've made things worse. She doesn't see me as family to her kids because we're not related by blood or adoption. I don't think I'm in the wrong here, and it's frustrating to see the family dismiss her behavior. If anyone confronted me about it, I'd explain that I've always respected her role as a parent, even when she asked me to step back from being an aunt years ago. It hurt, but I understood and never crossed any boundaries. It's unfortunate that things turned out this way, but I had to respect her wishes. I didn't set these boundaries, I just followed them. When she complained to OP could have responded, "Do I know you?" But I wonder if the sister-in-law was the only daughter among the siblings. Maybe OP being the first woman to marry into the family triggered her. Over time, as the other brothers got married and had kids, she became less aggressive, but the damage was done. The only reason the sister-in-law regrets it now is because OP turned out to be a fantastic aunt to other children, and the sister-in-law's plan backfired. Actions have consequences. You followed her instructions not to get involved. It seems like the rest of the family knows she's difficult too. Everyone here seems to have their faults. You probably aren't telling the whole story about what's going on between you and your sister-in-law. But it's not fair for either of you to involve the kids. And what about your husband? Does he also ignore his niece and nephew? Why is he supporting either of you acting this way? I couldn't disagree more. The sister-in-law made the choice to exclude OP and is now causing conflict because OP respected the boundary she set around her kids. Are you suggesting OP should have ignored that boundary? I understand your concern for her kids. Sadly, they suffer because of their mom's actions. But before you try to change anything, consider how your sister-in-law will react. She might turn any contact into something negative. Keep that in mind as you decide what to do next. This situation happened 2 months ago, but he's still upset about it. I'm a 45-year-old woman. I love my oldest son, but he's almost an adult and acts like one. In our family, everyone takes turns doing chores like cooking, washing dishes, and cleaning common areas on different days. Unfortunately, my son dislikes chores and always tries to avoid them. It's been an ongoing struggle. Washing dishes is particularly troublesome. He fills the dishwasher too much, preventing the detergent from reaching the dishes, leading to them not getting clean. I interrupted him quickly and reminded him that the dishwasher sanitizes dishes. My husband supported me, saying, if he wants dinner, he'll eat from his dishes. He often promised to wash some, but I refused, reminding him that he had the chance to clean them properly the night before. I told him to eat from them as they were or skip dinner. He yelled and threatened to make his own food, but I stood firm. Eventually he gave in, reluctantly selecting the least dirty dishes and eating quietly. I felt bad seeing him so disgusted, but I was tired of the wasted time, water, and detergent. It turned out well. His dishes came out perfectly clean afterward. However, he's still angry, and I do feel guilty now. But I'm tired of his deliberate laziness causing problems for everyone else in the house. Am I wrong? You're not wrong, and I think you handled the situation well. However, I disagree with your statement that he doesn't realize his laziness screws over everyone else in the house. He knows, he just doesn't care. He's old enough to understand the consequences of his actions, and it's time he learns. This should have been addressed sooner. If he doesn't face consequences, he won't change his behavior. Instead, he learned that even when I make a mistake, my parents will have to fix it because they need to eat too. What OP did was smart because he's almost an adult, and it's time to learn how to do things properly. The fact that he suddenly knew how to do the dishes correctly overnight shows that he was capable all along but chose not to do them properly. Well done, OP. I grew up in poverty but worked harder than anyone else to achieve success in my personal, financial, and professional life. My family often had to choose between bus fare and a meal. So when I became financially successful, many people approached me for help. I helped them out of compassion and understanding, knowing how much a small gesture can mean to someone in need. However, many of those I helped started to see me as their personal ATM. I never faced this issue with people who were already financially stable. They would have been embarrassed to ask. While I don't spoil my kids, we do live comfortably in a nice house in a good neighborhood, and I expect them to work hard and excel in school. My eldest son, a teenager, got into trouble for telling a peer that he didn't want to be friends because of his financial situation. A teacher overheard and reacted strongly. Unlike that teacher, I took the time to understand the context and facts before responding. My son then began spending time with Austin. Austin would often lament about not having money to participate in activities, so my son would sometimes cover for him. Like when they went to see Top Gun and Austin couldn't afford a ticket, my son paid for him. However, things got uncomfortable when Austin began to expect my son to foot the bill regularly. The tipping point came when they went to IHIL with friends, and Austin assumed my son would pay for his meal too. While my son only ordered onion rings, Austin indulged in a full meal, dessert, and milkshake. Later, my son vented to their friends about how little money he receives from me, and yet he still has to work as a tutor, only for Austin to take advantage of his generosity. Consequently, their friends distanced themselves from Austin. A few weeks later, in class, Austin wondered why he wasn't being invited to hang out anymore. My son replied, because he's tired of covering for him. Austin responded, but I'm poor. My son sarcastically remarked, oh, so you're too poor to be friends with? Maybe I should quit school and get a job like him. This exchange prompted a call from the teacher. I clarified the context of the conversation to the teacher, as she wasn't receptive when my son tried to explain it. She labeled my son as mean and threatened detention. I informed her that I would advise my son not to serve detention for this incident and asked her what she planned to do about it. She ultimately dropped the matter. Edit. It's important to note that Austin isn't in extreme poverty. He has access to resources like last year's iPhone. He has the ability to work like other kids at their school, but chooses not to. You're not in the wrong here. Consider discussing with the head teacher the emotional toll on your son, who has been coerced into giving money repeatedly, and how the last incident bordered on theft. Your son deserves support in standing up to emotional manipulation and bullying, and he has the right to end the friendship. The teacher should have heard the whole story before jumping to conclusions. Everyone involved made mistakes here. While your son's outburst might warrant detention, it's not ideal for you to interfere with a teacher's disciplinary actions unless there's a significant issue with her approach. It might be beneficial to help your son improve how he expresses himself to avoid more serious consequences in the future. I agree, your son has the right to stand up for himself. But the way he expressed it could have been kinder. A more effective approach would have been to say something like, I don't want to be friends with someone who takes advantage of me, which addresses the real issue without targeting Austin's financial situation. Being overly confrontational with someone who feels entitled might lead to further trouble. Given the circumstances, your son's response wasn't entirely unreasonable. It was a sarcastic retort to someone making excuses for their behavior. The teacher's refusal to listen to the full story and her decision to focus on a poorly worded phrase taken out of context didn't help the situation. I know it might sound odd, but I don't think I'm in the wrong here. I just need some other perspectives on this. My brother, who dropped out of high school, recently got married to his wife, who has similar qualifications, at the young age of 19. I'm 23, just to give some context. The situation is complicated, but basically my brother's mother-in-law pushed them into getting married because she wanted a grandchild as soon as possible. Unfortunately, my own mother went along with it, which I find frustrating. Now my new sister-in-law is expecting, which confirms my suspicions. I know I might seem disrespectful, but I'm not happy about it. We're not well off financially. My dad, who used to be assertive, didn't step in to prevent this situation. Ironically, he persuaded me against attending the college I wanted because of the high tuition fees. To cover the wedding costs, my dad borrowed money from my uncle, his brother, and now he's pressuring me to repay it because my brother and sister-in-law, being young and expecting, can't afford to. They told me they're in too much debt to get a loan from a bank, so it falls on me since I'm debt-free with savings and a job. When they brought this up, I didn't say anything. I just laughed and left. Now they're bombarding me with calls and texts asking for financial help, but I refuse to budge. It feels like we're living in completely different realities. It's not about culture or anything like that. Am I wrong for refusing to take out a loan for my family? Definitely not. Goodness, what a chaotic situation. If no one can afford to cover the wedding costs, what about the baby? It seems like they'll keep turning to you for loans they won't repay. Stand your ground. This isn't your problem to fix, so don't entertain further discussions about it. If they can't afford a lavish wedding without a substantial loan, maybe they should prioritize their resources for the baby instead. Laughing in their faces was a fitting response to such a ridiculous request. Oh, please ensure that you're the only one with access to your savings. Secure your accounts with updated passwords and avoid staying logged into online banking on shared devices. It's important to take these precautions, especially if your parents have access to personal information like your social security number and employment history. While you might believe they wouldn't take advantage of you, financial strain can drive people to make unexpected decisions. That's right. If they have your social security number, they could potentially open credit in your name, leaving you in a difficult situation. It's a quick process, but you can easily lock your credit by contacting the major reporting agencies, usually 3 of them, either by phone or online. Reversing the lock is simple when you're ready to apply for loans for things like a home, education, or a car. Their financial irresponsibility shouldn't fall on your shoulders. They need to figure out a repayment plan for your uncle on their own. Growing up, I lived with my best friend and his wife, Amanda, on I-35. While Amanda has always been a friend, I've had a closer relationship with her husband. Unfortunately, they moved out of town years ago, only returning for significant family events like funerals or weddings. A few months back, Amanda visited for her sister-in-law's bachelorette party, despite feeling uneasy about it due to her sister-in-law's mistreatment stemming from jealousy or other issues. Wanting to ease her nerves, I offered to pick her up from the airport and take her out for drinks afterward. However, I made a mistake and forgot to add it to my calendar. I had already planned a date for that night and couldn't cancel it, so I arranged for the sister-in-law's best friend to pick up Amanda and take her to the hotel. 2 days later, I met up with Amanda for drinks. She was feeling really down after her mistreatment at the bachelorette party, where everyone else seemed to ignore her. We spent a few hours chatting and drinking, and then I received a text from my girlfriend, asking me to come over to her apartment. I arranged for a mutual friend to join Amanda at the bar and keep her company before leaving. After that night, Amanda stopped communicating with me. She ignored my texts and social media messages for 3 months. Finally, I decided to ask my best friend about what was going on with his wife. He listed a series of complaints Amanda had against me, including forgetting her birthday multiple times despite Facebook reminders, which she doesn't use, and the incident at the bar where I forgot to pick her up from the airport and left her alone. I explained to my friend that I tend to be absent-minded, and they should have been aware of that by now. I also mentioned that Amanda is overly sensitive and holds onto grudges. I reminded him that I had already apologized to her for everything, so I didn't understand why she was still upset. However, my best friend became angry and is now not speaking to me either. Do you think I'm the one in the wrong here? As Mary, nearing her late 50s, reflects on her life, she finds herself at a turning point. With her 2 children, one on the brink of marriage and the other thriving in college, she senses her motherly duties waning. As a former nurse, she contemplates a return to caregiving, feeling the pull of her profession once more. However, life throws her a curveball when she receives distressing news. Her father-in-law, Bob, has suffered a stroke. Rushing to the hospital at her husband John's urgent call, Mary's thoughts soar with concern. Bob, always a pillar of kindness and warmth, has been grappling with the loss of his wife, Alice, for the past 3 years. Despite Mary's efforts to uplift his spirits through family gatherings and outings, she's noticed a gradual decline in Bob's energy. Just as she begins to see glimmers of his old vitality returning, the news of his stroke hits her like a thunderbolt. Arriving at the hospital, she finds Bob's daughter and son-in-law engaged in conversation. a mix of emotions swirling within her. Apologies for my tardiness. How's Bob holding up? I gasped out, hurting to catch up with John's sister, Isabella. Her response was a sigh of irritation as she glanced my way, clearly annoyed. You're late. We're in a hurry. Can you handle this? With that brisk dismissal, she hurried off, leaving me behind. Isabella's indifference towards Bob was palpable, a demeanor she carried even when Alice, Bob's late wife, was alive. Despite Bob and Alice's unwavering kindness, Isabella remained aloof, untouched by their warmth. Left alone in the waiting area, I paced nervously, my thoughts consumed by Bob's condition. Meanwhile, John rushed in, his concern evident in the beads of sweat on his forehead and his soaked dress shirt. "Mary, how's Dad?" he asked anxiously. I shook my head, indicating I had no updates yet. John's reaction was visceral. He dropped the bags he was carrying, his complexion draining of color. "No, that's not what I meant," I reassured him quickly. "He's still in surgery. We're waiting for news." Relief washed over John, evident in the way he retrieved his fallen bags and slumped into a nearby chair. "Should we brace ourselves?" I hurried over to John, who teetered on the edge of tears, and placed a comforting hand on his back. "It'll be all right," I murmured, feeling utterly helpless with no words substantial enough to offer solace. Hours ticked by before the surgery's conclusion, and we were ushered into a small room by the doctor for an update. "The surgery went well, but there may be lasting effects," the doctor explained gently, indicating that Bob would require ongoing care. While our hearts hoped for Bob's swift recovery, the reality of caregiving loomed, a responsibility that would involve Isabella and her husband. John and I decided to reach out to Isabella to discuss the next steps. After a conversation, we agreed to convene at Bob's home, a gathering necessitated by the circumstances while Bob remained hospitalized. "I won't be his caregiver," Isabella declared bluntly, sending shockwaves through John and me. "But what are we supposed to do then?" I countered, baffled by her indifference. Isabella, nonchalant, continued toying with her meticulously manicured nails, a stark contrast to the gravity of the conversation. Her husband, Tom, simply nodded along. "What about a nursing home?" I suggested, met with Isabella's vehement refusal. "I'm not wasting money on that. This is what happens whenever I get involved," she snapped, shooting me a venomous glare. "It's like my opinion doesn't matter, so I keep quiet. If he can't go to a facility and neither of you will care for him, what's the plan?" John pressed, frustration seeping into his voice. "That's why you should handle it. I don't want some burden in my home," Isabella chuckled callously, pushing me to my breaking point. "Enough. He's your father, for heaven's sake," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I don't care. Why am I expected to bear the responsibility just because he's my father? He's John's father too. I've been saying you two should handle it." "I don't have a response to that. We'd love to care for him at home, but our house isn't equipped for it," I explained, feeling the weight of reality pressing down. "There are too many obstacles, stairs, uneven floors, to bring my father-in-law here. We need significant renovations and we simply can't afford it." "Mary, you're trained in caregiving, aren't you? It shouldn't be a big deal," Isabella remarked smugly, her tone grating on my nerves. John shared my frustration, and we silently agreed to table the discussion for now, retreating from his parents' home. "What's our next move, Mary? You mentioned considering a return to caregiving," John inquired, his concern evident. "It's not just about the job. We have to make this place safe for Dad, and that's a financial challenge," I replied, trying to reassure him. "You're right," John conceded, acknowledging the daunting road ahead. "I estimate it could cost around $100,000. That's just a ballpark figure, but considering the modifications needed for the entire first floor to accommodate him, that's roughly what we're looking at," I mused aloud, grappling with the daunting financial reality. With our eldest still in college, we simply don't have that kind of money. We're still paying off the mortgage, and the thought of taking on another loan for renovations is overwhelming. It's a difficult decision, but should we consider a facility for him? The question is, would he even be able to get in? The waitlists are long, and the expenses significant, and I doubt Isabella and her family would offer any assistance. It feels like we're stuck with no viable solution. Deciding to at least listen to my father-in-law's perspective, I made my way alone to the hospital where he was admitted. Stepping into his room, I was greeted by a sight that lifted my spirits. My father-in-law, visibly improved, greeted me with a warm smile. Please don't apologize, my father-in-law would often murmur upon my visits. There's no trouble at all. And look, I've brought you one of your favorite books today. Why apologize? You're bringing me joy, I'd respond, trying to uplift his spirits. The doctor had informed us of his stroke, leaving him unable to move the right half of his body independently. To read, he'd prop the book on the table, using a weight to keep the pages steady. Ah, thank you, my father-in-law replied gratefully, accepting the book I'd brought. I gently placed the book by his pillow. Dad, I came today because I wanted to talk about what lies ahead, I began, meeting his warm smile with a heavy heart. Oh, I understand. I'll be fine, even in a nursing home. I've prepared for it, so please don't worry, he reassured me, though I sensed a flicker of loneliness in his eyes. Well, Dad, if you're open to it, why not come stay with us? I have experience in elderly care, and as a stay-at-home mom, I have the time. John will be there too. Let's live together, I blurted out, sensing his solitude. His surprise was evident, perhaps realizing deep down that returning to his own home, where Isabella and her husband resided, might not be feasible. I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd view him as a burden, ultimately leading to a nursing home. The thought weighed heavily on me, overshadowing my initial intention to listen to my father-in-law's wishes. There was a twinge of guilt toward my husband John, but I knew he'd understand. Now, we needed to arrange for his care upon discharge. Money was a concern, so I decided to seek Isabella's input. With these thoughts swirling in my mind, I made my way home. When John returned from work, I recounted the events at the hospital. He appeared troubled but nodded, almost as if he had anticipated this turn of events. Without delay, John dialed Isabella's number. We're reaching out for assistance because we'll be the ones caring for Dad, John explained, his voice tinged with frustration as their conversation escalated. With a resigned sigh, he ended the call and briefed me on their exchange. Isabella refused to contribute any funds. It seems there's little we can do about it, he disclosed, his concern evident as he contemplated the financial implications for his father-in-law. From then on, our home buzzed with activity. We deliberated over renovations, essential care supplies, and received guidance on home care options. When I informed my father-in-law that he'd be moving in with us upon discharge, his expression was a mix of gratitude and regret. Mary, could you fetch the checkbook from over there? He requested, gesturing toward a cloth bag on the shelf. Curious as to why he'd need it, I obliged, retrieving the checkbook during one of our visits. Observing my father-in-law, I watched as he opened the bank book and presented it to me. I have some savings here. Could you and John make use of it? The figure written in the checkbook was staggering, surpassing any amount I'd ever seen. Stunned, I must have appeared frozen, prompting my father-in-law to chuckle. You and John will be looking after me now, won't you? I heard about the new car, the renovations to make the house accessible. Would $10 million cover it? $10 million. The zeros overwhelmed me, leaving me speechless. I couldn't fathom why my father-in-law had amassed such a fortune, but it seemed that after my mother-in-law's passing, he had turned to investments he had been studying, and they had proven lucrative. His savings had grown exponentially, fueled by his restrained spending habits. Yet even if he intended to renovate the house or purchase a car, the sum seemed excessive. Reluctantly, I returned the bank book, shaking my head. I can't accept this much. Please keep it for yourself. He pushed the book back toward me, insisting, I can't possibly use all of this. I'd rather return it to you and your family, who are willing to care for me. Once again faced with the returned bank book, I stood my ground. I really can't accept such a large sum, I insisted firmly. After a brief pause, my father-in-law proposed, how about $1 million? Realizing the impasse, I managed to negotiate a compromise, settling on a reduced amount of $100,000. Though he seemed reluctant, he agreed, and for the time being, that seemed satisfactory. As we were in the midst of this exchange, Isabella suddenly appeared, catching us off guard. Quickly, I stashed the bank book back in its place. Seeing my hurried actions, Isabella's brow furrowed in concern. What's going on? She inquired, her voice tinged with worry. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful she hadn't overheard our previous conversation. Isabella had come to deliver some clothes for our father. After a brief exchange, we left the hospital room together. However, on our way home, Isabella suggested stopping by a coffee shop for a discussion. Given her history of bringing up unpleasant topics, I braced myself for what was to come. Reluctantly, I acquiesced. Unaware of the twist awaiting us, "I'll take care of Dad," Isabella declared out of the blue, stunning me. Her sudden proposition caught me off guard, especially since we were already knee-deep in preparations to accommodate my father-in-law, including ongoing renovations to our home. I couldn't fathom why she would make such a proposal at this stage. "So you won't need to visit the hospital anymore," she added. "Visiting isn't solely the responsibility of the caregiver. There's no rule dictating that only the caretaker should visit." Why would she say that? I pondered, feeling perplexed by Isabella's unexpected offer. Despite my reservations, I suggested we postpone discussing it further and made my exit from the cafe. Back at home, I shared the encounter with John, who mulled over it before a realization dawned on him. "She must have caught wind of the savings," he concluded. "It seems that's the case," he added. "Otherwise, she wouldn't have volunteered for the caretaking role, especially given her previous reluctance." I harbored a vague suspicion that Isabella had somehow discovered the extent of my father-in-law's savings and was angling to secure a share of it for herself. Perhaps she would concoct a reason to start dipping into the funds. "But what do we do about it?" I queried, feeling a sense of unease. "I got an idea. Let's give her a chance," John suggested with a mischievous grin, hinting at a plan brewing in his mind. Uneasy about his scheme, I opted to stay silent and play along with Isabella's request for the time being. I assured my father-in-law that financial concerns were no longer an issue and that Isabella would be providing care. His response was vague, his expression neither confirming nor denying his comprehension. With that, the conversation concluded. Following his discharge from the hospital, my father-in-law returned to the family home in Nebraska, where Isabella resided. During a visit to the house, I couldn't discern any signs of renovation or adequate caregiving supplies. I questioned whether genuine caregiving could take place under such circumstances. However, it was Isabella's decision, and I felt it wasn't my place to intervene, so I remained silent. 2 months later, I received a frantic call from Isabella. "Mary, I can't do this anymore. Please come over right now," she pleaded urgently. Concerned, I wasted no time and rushed to the house in Nebraska. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by a disarrayed house and a foul odor lingering in the air. Puzzled by the scene before me, Isabella emerged, looking more worn out than ever. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her movements were unsteady. "Are you all right?" I asked, rushing to her side, alarmed by her condition. Isabella grasped my hand tightly and muttered, "Get rid of that." Confused at first, I managed to calm her down and coax an explanation out of her. It appeared that she had underestimated the demands of caregiving. From assisting with mobility and meals to managing incontinence, including dealing with diapers, the responsibilities had overwhelmed her. She felt incapable of managing anything, not even attending to her own needs. I reassured her that I couldn't make any immediate decisions but promised to reach out as soon as possible. With a heavy heart, I carried this burden home with me. "It's been 2 months already." "Impressive," John remarked, glancing at the calendar. It seemed he had anticipated this turn of events. He suggested we pick up my father-in-law on his next day off, and I readily agreed. A few days later, as we arrived at the family home in Nebraska, my father-in-law was already packed and prepared to depart. Relief washed over me knowing we could finally bring him home. "Just because I endured for 2 months and used to live here doesn't mean I don't deserve compensation. I think $5 million sounds fair," Isabella declared suddenly as we were assisting my father-in-law into the car. I froze in disbelief. John, too, was taken aback, turning to face Isabella with a mixture of surprise and dismay. But she remained unfazed, sporting a smug expression. "Isabella, what on earth are you talking about? This isn't the time or place to discuss money, especially not in front of Dad. Remember, he raised us," John reasoned, attempting to appeal to her sense of decency, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. "I'm his daughter. It's only fair that I get compensated," Isabella retorted defiantly, her audacity catching me off guard. How could she be so brazen? Appalled by Isabella's attitude, I couldn't hold back. "Isabella, discussing money in this manner is completely inappropriate. Besides, you've already received funds," I interjected, my father-in-law echoing my sentiment with a disbelieving expression. "That's all gone now. Just $5 million. What's the harm in that? If you're just going to squander it away, you might as well put it to good use, sis." Isabella's callous words towards her own father left me speechless. Even my typically composed husband John was visibly enraged. his face flushing red with anger as he glared at his sister. "John, it's all right, she's stating the truth." Bob, my father-in-law, attempted to calm his incensed son. Then, turning to Isabella with a stern demeanor, he delivered his verdict. "Isabella, you are no longer welcome in this house. Leave immediately." His tone was cold and final. Stunned by his words, Isabella stood frozen in shock. What? What are you saying?" "I'm your daughter, Dad," Isabella exclaimed in disbelief. "I have only one child, my son, and this woman beside me, Mary, is my daughter-in-law. I no longer recognize you. Leave with your foolish husband." Bob, my father-in-law, responded with a sternness that startled me. I had only known him to be gentle and soft-spoken, but now his eyes were steely, commanding no opposition. Even Isabella seemed subdued by his authority. "Shall we depart then? We're relying on you moving forward," Bob continued, his demeanor shifting back to its usual warmth as he addressed me. With no other recourse, John and I complied with his directive. As we drove away, leaving Isabella behind in stunned silence, it felt surreal. Later, we learned that Bob had arranged with his lawyer to draft a last will and testament, ensuring that the inheritance would solely benefit John and guaranteeing that Isabella would not receive any portion of it. With Isabella gone, the house stood vacant and John and I expressed our desire to reside there. Bob gladly agreed. Isabella and her husband relocated to an apartment, but it became evident they had been tapping into Bob's finances even when he was in good health. Their extravagant spending habits landed them in debt, and now they struggle to settle it. Each day, I can't shake the feeling that this downfall was bound to happen for someone like Isabella, who lacks respect and gratitude towards her parent, regardless of biological ties. While tending to Bob's needs presents its challenges, my background in caregiving allows me to handle it without feeling burdened, and our relationship remains strong.
If the ownership of this house isn't transferred to me, I'm contemplating divorce. I was taken aback when my husband suddenly dropped this bombshell. This house holds precious memories of our family, and I can't bring myself to let it go. However, my husband is threatening me, playing with my emotions. Distraught, I reached out to my father for help. "My name is Emily. I'm 30 years old, a full-time housewife, dedicating my days to supporting my family through household chores. I married John 2 years ago, quitting my job to support our life together. My husband worked hard for us, but since my father-in-law's passing, my mother-in-law moved in, disrupting our peaceful life completely. Surprisingly, I learned about my mother-in-law's move only the day before it happened. When my husband came home, he casually mentioned it as if it were a natural thing. Huh, this is so sudden. Your mother is coming over to visit tomorrow?" I asked. "No, she's not coming to visit. She's moving in. So please prepare and clean up," he replied. In retrospect, I felt something was off about my husband's decision-making. Normally, such decisions should be discussed with his wife beforehand. However, in my case, the decision had already been made without my knowledge. The next day, my mother-in-law arrived with a lot of luggage, ready to move into our house. "It's been a while. I'm glad you look well, Mary. Please come in," I greeted her. Strangely, she seemed displeased. "Emily, why didn't you come pick me up? Isn't it common sense to meet at the station when your mother-in-law is coming, especially when I'm carrying big luggage?" she complained. I explained that I didn't know her arrival time, but she retorted that I should have contacted her, labeling me as thoughtless. From that day on, my mother-in-law's snide comments intensified. As soon as my husband left for work, the barrage began. "Emily, why are you sitting there? Do the dishes. You should have finished the laundry in the morning. That's common knowledge." I apologized and promised to do the laundry after the dishes. However, her comments continued, criticizing my priorities and claiming that in her house, there's a rule to do laundry immediately after breakfast, dismissing any excuses. I maintain my own daily routine. Why can't Mary understand that I'm not refusing to do the work? It seems she just can't accept my way of doing things. Even if I did things her way, she would still find fault and complain every day. The daytime hours alone with her were especially challenging. One day, I had an epiphany on how to end this living hell with my mother-in-law. move to the house I inherited from my father, and live in a separate home from her. My father retired early a few months ago, and as a result, my parents started a new life in the countryside. They then passed on their house to me. Fortunately, that house isn't too far from our current apartment, and we were planning to move eventually. Living with my mother-in-law has reached my limits, so I decided to talk to my husband about moving sooner. "John, can we talk for a moment?" I asked. He inquired, "What's up? Anything happened?" I brought up the house my father gave us and suggested moving there. "Oh, that house. We did talk about moving there someday. Why the sudden decision?" he wondered. I explained, "Well, I've been having some difficulties with your mother. I can't bear living with her anymore, so I'm seriously considering moving." Surprisingly, my husband agreed to the move. After informing Mary, we decided to move a week later. I thought she would oppose, but she accepted our decision with a big smile. "Goodbye, John and Emily. I'm so sorry for the sudden decision to move," she said. We reassured her, "Don't worry about it. It's wonderful that your father gave you the house. He's very sweet. Thank you. Please visit us sometime." She promised to visit, and we headed to our new home. I felt relieved. I wouldn't have to hear snide remarks from her anymore. From now on, I could live freely at my own pace. Although I thought she might oppose, I'm glad I consulted John. However, my peace did not last. While I could keep a distance from my mother-in-law and reduce stress, my husband started coming home late. It wasn't just late returns. There were days when he wouldn't come home at all. He was visiting his mother, defending his actions by saying he was worried about her. It became too frequent, disrupting my daily life. One day, I realized this couldn't go on. I sat him down for a talk. "John, you've been coming home really late lately, and sometimes you don't even come home at all. Is that so?" "I'm just worried about my mother," he replied. "That's not the point. At least let me know beforehand that you'll be late so I'll know I don't have to prepare dinner. Since you're a housewife and always at home, you can eat the leftovers for lunch the next day, right? So you're saying I should just accept everything quietly because I'm a housewife? Are you saying we shouldn't talk about this? Isn't that the truth? Housewives just relax at home, right?" "What? What are you saying? Anyway, I'm worried about leaving my mother alone. Ellie will be coming back soon, and I need to discuss some things with her." "Wait, Ellie is coming back." Ellie is John's sister who currently lives abroad for work. It was the first time I heard she's coming back, but what does he need to discuss with her? Curious, I asked my husband. "We're moving Ellie here to live with us." "What? Live together?" "Yes, she kept saying she wanted a big house like the one she lived abroad. That's why I thought of letting her stay in this house." "I don't understand." Suddenly informed of this, I couldn't think of anything. Is my sister-in-law going to live in this house? I was just able to escape Mary's bickering, and now his sister. Wait a minute. Why is Ellie going to live in this house? This is the house that I inherited from my father. It's unnatural. This is the only big house that would satisfy Ellie. The apartment where we used to live is now where my mother stays, and it's too small for 4 people. Don't just decide on your own. I never intended to live with Ellie. Oh, I don't plan to live together either. I intend to give this house to Ellie. What? Why? Because we plan to move back with my mother. Ellie can use this house freely. I was taken aback by my husband's unreasonable proposal and felt like fainting. Despite my repeated insistence that I had no intention of living with my mother-in-law, my husband eventually became furious. Can't you be a little more considerate? You can live because of me, so just do as I say. Enough is enough. Enough of your jokes. This house is precious to me, inherited from my father. Why should I give it to Ellie? Such a wonderful house is wasted on you, isn't it? I've already told Ellie that I've got her a large house. It's too late to say otherwise now. I wasn't consulted in any of this decision. Either way, I can't accept it. You're always complaining. Enough. Calm down and think. I'll go back to my mother's for a while. My husband angrily slammed the door and left. Left alone in the room, Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't understand why my husband decided everything on his own. It's unimaginable that he intends to give away the house. I inherited my father's house, but my husband insisted on giving it to my sister-in-law, Ellie. Every day, he bombarded me with messages, asking if I had calmed down and urging me to come back soon. Each time, I had to firmly tell him that I had no intention of agreeing. Then, one day, he sent a message that read, "Hey, Emily, when will you come here and live with me? Stop nagging. I've said it so many times. I have no intention of living with Mary, moving there, and giving this house to Ellie. I've already told Ellie, stop being selfish. She might be coming back this week, so there's no time. Why should I give up my house for your family? I inherited this house from my father. Don't decide on your own. Who do you think you're talking to? Even my mother is furious. I'm at my wit's end. That's not my problem. You're ignoring my feelings." My husband let out a big sigh over the phone, clearly frustrated. Then he said something shocking. "If you can't listen to me, then let's divorce. Hand over the house to Ellie. Leave by tomorrow." At that moment, my love for my husband quickly faded. Threatening me with the word divorce was utterly despicable, and I couldn't possibly forgive him. To use divorce as a threat without considering someone's feelings was unacceptable. I couldn't let these people have their way. As I burned with anger, my husband continued to speak with a triumphant and dominating tone. "Listen, if you don't leave by tomorrow, I'll really divorce you. Got it?" "Wait, are you serious?" I asked, shocked. "Of course I am. You don't have a choice. What will you do if you, a housewife, get divorced? You can't survive." "Enough, I get it." "Good. Hurry up and move over here. My mother is looking forward to disciplining you." He hung up the phone with a confident tone, thinking I would do as he said. After that call, I made up my mind and decided to seek help from my father for a plan. The next day came, and I calmly replied, "Yes, everything's ready," when asked about the move. Curious about Ellie's return, my husband inquired, "By the way, I'm curious about when Ellie will be back." "She'll be back tomorrow. Why are you so obsessed with Ellie? Between you and me, she seems to have made a lot from stock investments. I see, so if you provide her with the house, maybe you can ask for financial help. That's so like you. Anyway, you need to leave that house today. It's inconvenient for all of us. Don't worry." "I've already moved," I said calmly. "What? What do you mean?" My husband seemed genuinely surprised. "I knew it. You don't want to divorce me, do you? Naturally. Without an income, you can't survive. But all of this is coming to an end. We're still married now, so that's why we're talking." "Wait, what? I can only think about divorce now." My husband was clearly shaken by my words. "You promised to move out of that house, right, and live with me? But you've already moved. What are you saying? Of course, I won't live in a house with a husband who decides everything on his own and a bullying mother-in-law." "Huh. Why are you including me? You promised to move out for Ellie." "I said I've already moved, didn't I? I did as you said. Enough with the jokes. Where are you now?" My husband's tone was panicky, and he was clearly losing his cool. "Actually, I'm at my parents' house." "Why did I move to my parents' rural home?" "I don't plan on returning to where you guys are," I declared to my husband. He replied with a hint of relief in his voice. "You should have told me that sooner. If I could just give that house to Ellie, it doesn't matter where you live. It would require $3,300,000, he explained. $3,300,000? What? I exclaimed. I put the house I got from my father up for sale. So if you really want to give it to Ellie, buy it for $3,300,000 and then hand it over, he calmly stated. What? Are you joking? I'm serious, he insisted. The house was still in my father's name, so I asked him to sell it. In reality, what I asked my father for was to sell the house. My father had always said, if something happens, contact me. You can live or sell this house as you like. I'll help you. As a result of the valuation, a price of $3,300,000 was proposed, which I gladly agreed to and put the house on the market immediately. My husband probably never saw this coming. Consumed with anger, he spat out insults. "Why are you doing this without asking me? This is unforgivable." "Dan," I retorted, "I'm not asking for nor do I need your approval. We're getting divorced soon anyway. I don't care. Do you understand your position? You'll be the one in trouble if we divorce since you don't have an income. You're just a housewife. I'd rather struggle on my own than be with you forever. Listen, Ellie will be coming back soon. I told you, I'm relying on Ellie's money, didn't I? So, what? Like I said, if you want to let dear Ellie live in that house, just buy it for $3,300,000. That is if you can." "What? That's impossible. If Ellie has made a lot of money from her investments, I don't see why she can't afford it." "I don't know how much she made, but that's too much. She can never afford it," my husband insisted, maintaining his domineering attitude. I felt it was foolish to spend any more time on him and unleashed everything I wanted to say. "I'm done with you and this ridiculous mess. Did you think threatening divorce would make me give up the house? If you thought being a housewife meant I'd do whatever you say, you're so wrong. Hey, let's calm down and talk." "I am calm. Isn't it you who's panicking? I won't be controlled by you or your family anymore. Stay out of my life. Go to hell with your beloved mother, you mama's boy." I shouted loudly enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, then abruptly hung up the phone. Of course, I'd had enough of these insane calls from my husband, so I blocked his number. I immediately consulted my lawyer and decided to request a divorce. It took some time, but the divorce was finalized, recognizing my husband's fault. He and Mary still live in that apartment. As for Ellie, they couldn't provide the large house she wanted, and she was furious, claiming this wasn't the deal and made a U-turn back overseas. My ex-husband's plan to seek financial assistance from his successful sister fell through. Now, he seems to be struggling financially, having to pay me alimony and support his mother. As long as he continues to live with such a selfish mother, his life will never be prosperous. On the other hand, I've moved to the countryside and am enjoying peaceful days with my parents. I recently started a clerical job at a small company introduced by a neighbor. With that salary, I can live comfortably. I plan to live here for a while. I want to be by my parents' side as much as possible to repay the kindness they've shown me.